Then the next spot, we're going to go just down the road a little bit and look at an area that we just finished up logging, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, something like that. And we're going to talk about even age management versus uneven age management, the differences, the benefits, the drawbacks of both. And then so this stand right here was just logged. In fact, we finished up here about a month ago. So this is raw as it's going to get. You know, once again, I think about that question that came up the other night at the meeting about there's a tree here and then 20 feet away there's another tree and there's nothing in between. Well, maybe when you're driving by on the highway at 50 miles an hour it doesn't look like there's a whole lot. But actually when you get out and walk around, fine, except, so this answers your question. Here's one, it could have grown more, but there's only a finite amount of what I call growth resources in the soil, the nutrients, the water, the sunlight. And as you're looking around here, this was a white fir tree. We know that when white fir trees get above about 30 to 40 inches, they're not going to grow very much more. They're going to start rotting because they're not a very long-lived species in that size. I mean, in that regard, where you'll get the big 5-6 footers like you can with the pines. So by cutting this tree, we're allowing that redistribution of the growing resources to the other trees around it. One of them being this pine here, which we want to try to favor. And in this stand in here, what we tried to do was favor more of the pines. And there are some Doug fir.
Well, it's just the same thing as gardening, only on a far larger scale. Because you know what happens, I don't know if any of you have gardened before, but if you just put out a bunch of seeds and you water it and fertilize it, you're just going to have a mess. You got to thin it out, and you take out very good plants when you do the thinning, but so that the whole thing will produce fruit and better. Otherwise, the whole thing gets what we call stagnated.
Around 30 inches DBH, diameter at breast height, 4.5 feet above the ground. The Forest Service cannot cut any trees larger than 30 inches. And that was because back in 1992 there was a report that came out on the spotted owl that said that the spotted owl needed habitat that had trees in the 30 to 40 inch and larger category. So 30 to 40 inches and larger. So they immediately, and the recommendation was, let's put a temporary moratorium on cutting trees larger than 30 inches for a couple years so we can study.
What year was that?
1992.
Yeah.
19 years later. Well, now it's almost gospel that, I mean, it's law. You can't cut a tree greater than 30 inches.
The question was, as this sits right now, would it be desirable to come in here and, as a next step, to burn this?
Okay, and my answer is no. Absolutely not. And here's why. We've already achieved probably 90 to 95% of whatever benefit you're going to get from burning in here. By coming in here and burning, you're going to take off what little bit of slash that's left in here. Of course, that's got the nutrients in it too. It's going to be nothing but a pure cost to you. You know, nobody pays you to go out and burn.
Right.
Plus, you're releasing all those pollutants in the air, and you're going to get the ire of your neighbors up because you're creating all this smoke.
And you don't have the water retention.
This is another thing that drives me crazy about the Forest Service. They think they can't just walk away from this and leave it like it is. And we've shown that you can. You're getting most all of the benefit. And I'm not sure that you're not getting all of the benefit.
Well, you know, I knew about the redwoods, but I didn't know how many species we grow with fire.
You mean of tree species?
Yeah.
In this area, there's nothing that requires fire.
Yes.
And I hear that all the time, and it just drives me nuts.
The rumor I heard was the seed of a Doug fir needed to be...
There's been no fire here. That's a Doug fir cone. Do you think those seeds came out of there okay?
What role does clear cutting have in sustainable forestry?
In your opinion? Well, that was stop number 2 that we skipped. And maybe, depending on how much time, maybe we'll stop there on the way back. Clear cutting is a tool in forestry and in forest management, and it's an important tool. You need to have that in your toolbox. Unfortunately, and this is my opinion, I believe that some companies have overused that tool, and it's really got the ire of not only, you know, staunch environmentalists, but just normal, common, everyday people who see the pace and scale that it's happening at in their communities, and it's something completely foreign to them. These communities have had logging done in them for 100, 150 years, but they haven't had these clear cuts. And trust me, I mean, clear cuts are ugly. Nobody likes to look at them.
But aren't they good in one respect?
They are, Al. They are in the fact that you create a habitat that you can grow some of the pine trees.
You tear up the soil?
Turn all that stuff over. It's good. It's just depending on the pace and scale that you're doing it at. And my concern is that it's being overused in the northern Sierras. Well, it is. And
I can't believe everybody in the Forest Service agrees with that.
no, actually they don't. And here's another caveat that I got to throw in there. A lot of you folks have heard of the Quincy Library Group.
Right, QLG, yeah.
Okay, well the Quincy Library Group actually got started, well, I remember going to meetings
97, 98.
Well, I was going to meetings on it in 92, 93.
Well, that's when they began.
Yeah. When they first got started, you know, you were bringing folks who were polar opposites in their ideals about forest management together. And there was some level of distrust. There had just been a big fire down in the Barkley area that the Forest Service wanted to go salvage it. That's right in the middle of the Deer Creek and Mill Creek, 2 salmon-bearing fisheries. A lot of concern about that. And so in order to get the QLG, get buy-in from everybody on that, they came up with what were called deferred areas. And they said, you know what, we don't agree 100% on these particular areas, and it basically was Deer Creek and Mill Creek watersheds.
But
they said, you know, this is a 5-year pilot project. Let's agree not to go into these watersheds for the first 5 years. We got plenty of other ground to focus on. Let's focus on that, and rather than getting hung up on this 5% that we don't necessarily agree on, let's focus on the 95% that we do agree on. So that was the idea behind it. The act got renewed for another 5 years, then got renewed for another 5 years. So here we are 15 years into this temporary kind of off limits in the Deer Creek and Mill Creek watersheds. And this is a result of that. The local ranger here, it drives him crazy that he can't come in and do something with this. He really wants to treat this. Let's take the handcuffs off the Forest Service. We've dealt with this enough. Even the environmental folks say, we know what the big threat is. It's not logging, it's fire. We'll let you go in and treat these stands.